Alright. So I'm going to talk about I think the world is almost entirely composed of self-deception. Let's talk about that. Open-mindedness. Everyone likes to think that they're open-minded, but everyone likes to think that, say, like academia is based on merit, or like they care about understanding. But no one's really going to change their worldview. It doesn't matter really. I mean, worldviews really aren't based on evidence. Theoretical science isn't based on evidence. In terms of like, someone might say that there could be evidence for something hidden someday, like Einstein's space-time. But as in the previous podcasts, I tried to point out that there's conceptual problems, and that's what I mean by empirical. Is there's if you can show that there's like a conceptual problem, like Einstein trying to fill the gap between planets, but it creates a smaller gap, and as long as you have a gap, you have a need for disposition to bridge that gap. That you tell people this and they'll just like scoff, or an academic, well, I mean, maybe not the average person that thinks a little bit, but even philosophy majors, they might look at what you do, but if you don't have like the stamp of approval from a familiarized authority, they only give you so much time. They've already discounted what you say, and they can't tell the difference. I mean, they might kind of get what you're saying, but like they don't give it much weight because you don't have a professorship or something like that. And that's really what holds back civilization, is that nothing that could have any merit, no one can really tell the difference anyway. I know movies try to give this impression that there's all these noble people and everyone's open-minded, and like, especially academics, and it's just not true. It's just all about your position of power. And if you learn this in your 30s, suppose you didn't have the internet, it's kind of depressing, because if you're not like that, and if you're not like that, you probably have been taken advantage of a lot, because pretty much you realize that everyone's out for themselves. Like, even your family, if you have different priorities, if your personality has different priorities than them, they're not going to agree with you. They're not going to help you a lot of the time if their priorities are different, because people think that their priorities are the true priorities, and that somehow other priorities are somehow an illusion, and people just have to get over them or something. So that creates a problem for if you're trying to like solve any problem of humanity, because nobody really wants these problems solved. They want them solved in their particular way, and anyone with a different ideology, they're just gonna do this, because everyone thinks they have the true ideology. So you can't really sway anyone. They're all locked down. They've been normalized, or they've bought into some familiarized authority. It's not based on evidence. No one's worldview is actually based on evidence. So, I mean, but that's what's so trippy, is everyone thinks that their worldview is based on evidence, and they'll give you an argument. You can punch a hole in that argument, but it doesn't change anything. And then people go on thinking that they're still open-minded. So it creates, I don't really know what to do. Um, I've been working on something for 14 years and gotten nowhere, and just gotten more and more frustrated because everyone that thinks that they're open-minded isn't really open-minded. You can't convince them, obviously, that they're not open-minded because they want the status of feeling like they're open-minded, uh, and they can't see what you're saying. So I don't know what to do about that because it creates a problem for like changing the world. Everyone's just at each other's throats. Um, Everyone's solution, like you got individualists and you got collectivists, and then you have the bankers, and they all have their solution of how the world should be. Nobody wants to hybridize because they think that their way is the true way. And you can't beat that out of them. And no one's going to give up their position of power, and no one that has any power really cares about the people that don't have any power. And it just kind of incrementally is getting worse. Like, the dollar keeps on getting deflated. Nobody can figure out what's causing it. I mean, obviously the Fed is causing it. And wage disparity between like CEOs. That's not just going to spontaneously reverse. It doesn't matter how much anyone protests. It's not gonna. It doesn't change people's minds. Maybe that's what needs to happen. I mean, you can also see a trend in society where people we're slowly losing all our illusions. Like, the baby boomers had the illusion that they changed anything, and really they didn't do anything. In fact, they are the problem pretty much now. Like, in Generation X, they didn't really have the internet to guide them. You can see, sort of like looking back on it, like bands like Nirvana give this impression, and like comedians like Bill Hicks, they give this impression that you can kind of opt out of society. But that's not true. They won't let you do that. There's no way out of it. And they don't also tell you that your credit score is you. And once your credit score is screwed up, like, your whole life is screwed up. I mean, try renting. It's not simply renting has gotten a lot harder. Is now they have all these new constraints, and jobs have all these new constraints. Like, to be a substitute teacher, like 10, 12 years ago, you didn't have to have 3 letters of recommendation. And you just had to jump through all the, like, fingerprinting and stuff like that. But now, it's just there's not enough jobs. And so they can have these higher constraints on people. And it's a real shock to people that grew up or were in their 20s, around 2000 and stuff like that, because they had no idea. They didn't have YouTube. Now people have all the information right in front of them. It's a lot different. They're not fooled by movies or anything like that. It's a huge advantage. That's why Generation X is probably, it is the most indebted generation, because they had no idea. They took out all these student loans on the advice of baby boomers. Baby boomers are all the professors with their cushy jobs, believing their own hype. And I don't really know what to do about all that. I mean, until the baby boomers kind of get older, and Generation Z is really the final hope. I mean, they don't have the illusion that Generation Y has that you can protest and get anything done. Um, they also probably won't have the, hopefully, have the illusion that you can change the people that have power into hippies. Like, because usually people that are hardcore collectivists tend to have this sort of like Peter Joseph, they have this habituation kind of like view of human nature that everything is habitual. You can change people's habits or give them new knowledge and then change them somehow. But hopefully Peter Joseph can start to tell now, like just his interactions with like Alex Jones and Stefan Molyneux, that there's no synthesis. There's no convincing anyone. We're dispositions in opposition. The opposite side, like say Stefan Molyneux, they usually have like a free will type worldview, and you can't convince them otherwise. You can give them very compelling reasons why we're not really free like we think we are. One of those would be, why do we even give and ask for reasons for our actions if those don't actually explain, in some sense, our actions in mental states? See how weird that is? Why would you even ask for them if you could just override for reasons, if you just spontaneously can override these reasons? But I'm sure if I explained that to Stefan Molyneux, he'd try to find some weird way out of it. I have other reasons for thinking that human behavior is dispositional, but just that one reason should give people pause. It's really obvious. Yeah. So we're stuck in this antagonism. Nobody wants to cooperate. Nobody can figure out that we're all just dispositions, and the dispositions aren't going to go away. Like, you're not going to get rid of the disposition to consolidate symbolic power. Hopefully, like I was saying before, Generation Z can figure that out, because otherwise, I don't see anything changing. You sort of have to make a deal that works for the people that have power so they can maintain their power, but not at the expense of people starving or people being homeless. I mean, my idea, I've had a lot of ideas, but one is that I've been working on this worldview for 14 years. It's entirely empirical, and I would have the idea to possibly, because you can't change the money system. I already tried doing that. You can't get anyone to listen to you. So next best thing might be to try to change the worldview. You have to attack academia, attack theoretical science a lot, and try to get the government to assist you, and then you take this new worldview and you use any kind of like profit you can extract from it to fund a subsidized living or subsidized rent. But I wouldn't call it subsidized rent so much, because the subsidy would have to be universal. Otherwise the individualist would go, why them and not me? And it'd have to be by state, and it would have to be like universal across the state, because if you gave a higher subsidy in richer areas, if it was done by percentage of rent, then the poor people would just try to move into the rich areas, and the rich people don't want that. They wouldn't allow that. You could switch it where it's like a higher subsidy in the poor areas to like enhance building up poorer areas. That's one possibility. Um, this is like an alternative to like constantly struggling against individualists to try to get uh, a living minimum wage, because they just think that people that can't make it are lazy, and they just have to try harder like them. They can't see that their personality is different and their personality is easier. Particularly, anyone that is introspective at all or like is empathetic kind of gets used by these people. I mean, I feel like I've been used, um, particularly by younger people. Um, they want to always like use your car if they don't have a car, but they might be in a better financial situation than you, and they're trying to like live off of you, and you're struggling because you have student loans and they don't have any of that, and they have more potential than you uh, to get a higher paying job, but they'll still use you because that's what most of the world is like. And if you're not like that, it's very depressing to find that out when you're in your 30s because you didn't have the internet. Uh, yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Alright,